Hello, everybody. I'm Michelle Hawk, and I'm so happy and grateful to welcome you to our class today, where we're talking about alchemy for personal transformation. This is definitely a topic and a mystery school that is near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to be sharing with you some of the core pieces of why alchemy is so amazing, why I love it so much, and then how to apply it to your personal transformation for you, and then also, if you are a practitioner, a couple of considerations that you can take away and hopefully to apply to your own practice. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you here. I don't usually make slides for classes like this, but I have been playing with that recently and it's awesome. So here we go. Yay. All right. So, alchemy, practical magic for personal transformation. Alchemy is, emphasis on the practical magic. This is something that is really important to me as a practitioner and as a teacher. Here, you'll see here at the bottom, functional spirituality. I'll just go ahead and lead with that. I have lots of different trainings. I have lots of different certifications. I've been studying and practicing shamanism and alchemy and energy medicine since I was 15. But I have really come to see over time that if your spiritual practice doesn't translate beyond your meditation cushion, or if you can't put into practice the things that you're doing in your meditation practice, in your spiritual practice, they are not worth your time. So please know that as you are coming to this class, or maybe you're doing some other trainings or work with me, I am not going to teach you things that you can't put into practice in your life, because my priority is spirituality should help us be more effective humans. And it ideally is given to us in such a way, or we practice it in such a way that we can translate it into real life skills that we use every day. So as a longtime practitioner, that is my priority. That's my priority for my students. That's my priority for you here today, is that you can take away something maybe that you knew you needed, or something that you didn't even know you needed, and be able to apply it in your life starting right now. So I just to introduce myself, yeah, functional spirituality is super important to me. But my background is I have been studying and practicing for quite a long time. Shamanism is my longest lineage in my many lineages and practices that I have been studying over the years. I also have a lot of training in different avenues of energy medicine and in alchemy, both in the Western Hermetic alchemy and Eastern Taoist practice and philosophy. And again, the core of my practice is practical application of this spiritual technology. So I mentor and train other practitioners. I work with healers and mystics, coaches, and people who aren't practitioners but still want these tools and want to apply it to their lives for their personal transformation. Alchemy, what we'll be talking about today is alchemy as a modern mystery school. It is really unique in a variety of ways. So we'll talk about some of the things that makes alchemy unique. Science and spiritual practice. My background is in biology. My degree is in biology, specializing in animal physiology and behavior. So I come from a background of science. Science is very important to me, and to me, alchemy is a really great union of that science and spirituality. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Alchemy is a practice based in universal law. So we're working with physics here. We're working with the laws of how things are in the world. This isn't just a set of dogma that someone made up at one point. We're working with how things are in the world and in the universe. And I'm going to tell you what most quote transformational guides are missing. And the reason I'll show you the reason I put that in quotes there, because if people aren't actually doing this, they're not actually supporting transformation, no matter what they say or what their marketing says. We're going to look at the cycle of transformation. I'll give you a snapshot of the actual process of alchemy, and we'll look at one stage in depth. And that's where we're going to look at our practical application for here today. And I'm going to share with you an opportunity to learn more about becoming an alchemist and some avenues that are available to you to step into becoming an alchemist. So, as a modern mystery school, the alchemy has ancient origins. It is the oldest, or one of the oldest, spiritual practices and spiritual traditions that still exists in the modern era. And there's a lot of mystery shrouding the early origins of alchemy for a variety of reasons. One of which is, with many of these mystery schools, with many of these esoteric practices, there was a lot of secrecy in order to protect the knowledge, in order to ensure the preservation of the knowledge and of the practices. They're also, depending on where in the world and during what time period in the world, there was also a lot of butting up against either political or religious dogma and persecution of people who are practicing alchemy and practicing these esoteric mysteries. So we don't know for sure, but a lot of the documents and a lot of the records point to ancient Egypt as a possible origin source of alchemy, or possibly even older than that. So we're talking many, many thousands of years here. And alchemy over the years has had a really profound influence on many traditions, including shamanism. And so I call myself a shamanic alchemist, partly because I have a lot of training in both of these lineages, shamanism and alchemy, but also partly because they collaborate together really well. And we also see alchemical influence in Kabbalah, in Taoism, in astrology, in tarot, in many of these other esoteric traditions. Alchemy also, not to go too deeply into this, but because alchemy is really a core root and a transformational practice that is a core root of so many other practices, it integrates really smoothly into other spiritual practices because it is based in universal law. So if you have an existing spiritual practice, if you have an existing religious practice, alchemical practice and philosophy is actually not going to be all that different. And it might even give you even deeper understanding of the practices and lineages that you already have. So please keep that in mind. It plays nice with other friends. It can go as a tool in the toolbox and work really well. And it is related to that. Alchemy is universally applicable. This is one of the things that I love so much about it, is that we get to translate these ancient teachings into modern applications and find that they support us really profoundly. So even if we're not necessarily working with some of the literal things that we were seeing in the ancient alchemical literature, we are putting them into practice within the modern context and finding that these tools are just as effective as they were thousands of years ago, and that they are just as necessary, just as applicable, and just as helpful, and just as worth our time. Science and spiritual practice. Again, as I mentioned, I love science. I'm a huge fan of science. And to me, science and spirituality have always gone hand in hand in my life. I remember, being back in my bio classes in high school and considering the implications of consciousness. And in high school, I had already started to study and practice shamanism. So understanding the dynamic relationship of aliveness in what I was seeing in the microscope and in the data that I was taking in my field studies, to me, it has always been related to each other. So actually, most of our modern sciences originate from alchemy. So we can see, even the same root of the word alchemy, chemistry, right? All of our current modern medicine that we have in the Western world, modern medicine, chemistry, physics, psychology, actually comes from alchemists hundreds and thousands of years ago doing different experiments to try to understand the world around them. Because that's, years and years ago, science and spirituality were deeply enmeshed. And the alchemical practice, part of what the alchemists were doing was attempting to understand their bodies, human bodies, different materials in the world, understand how healing works, understand the composition of different elements. We have the periodic table because alchemists way back in the day were trying to turn lead into gold. And by using these different chemical processes, they developed the different apparatuses, different chemical materials and equipment that we see in a modern chem lab, and also being able to isolate different elements and discover the core material, the core building blocks of the material world around us through this spiritual through the spiritual investigation. And all of that, the turning lead into gold, or trying to turn lead into gold, and trying to create the philosopher's stone, which is the journey of alchemy, was really this journey of enlightenment. Because all of that, all the chemical processes of the alchemists, all the material science and investigation, was really about delving into their own consciousness and coming to know the divine. and coming to know the intersection of the divine and the material world. So this is where, again, we have this beautiful union of science and spiritual practice, which is, it positions alchemy very uniquely as being applicable in on all levels, on our physical bodies, on our material world around us, on our hearts and minds, and on our etheric bodies, our energy bodies. And that's part of the reason I love it so, so much. So, universal law here again, when we're working with alchemy, if you start, and we're not going to get into a lot of the deepness today, just because, again, this is a multiple thousands of years old ancient mystery school, but we will start to get into one aspect in particular of universal law that is one of the core teachings of alchemy. And but really all of the teachings of alchemy are based in how the world works, based in physics, based in the movement of energy. If you start to look at the different laws of energy and laws of thermodynamics, etc., and object in motion stays in motion, etc., then we're talking alchemical law. So it is, again, universally applicable because it's based in how energy moves, how material moves through the world. And so when we understand that, part of studying alchemy is studying physics and studying astronomy and studying, studying thermodynamics, etc. But when we understand the multiplicity of meaning in what we're doing, we're understanding the codes of transformation, and we're mastering those codes in order to translate them into our lives and the world to create transformation. So as alchemists, that's what we're doing, is we're studying science, we're studying universal law, and we are coming into collaborative relationship with the cycles of power that exist all around us everywhere in order to direct and translate that into measurable transformation. This is the missing key. So the thing back at the beginning when I told you most quote transformational guides or quote transformational work focuses on one small part of the alchemical cycle, and they miss some of the most important pieces. And this is why I put it in transformation in quotes, is because if they are missing all these pieces, then transformation actually cannot occur. The thing about transformation is that unless you seek it out, no one ever actually teaches you how transformation works. This is one of those skills that people sort of assume they know how to do, or assume that it's like one of those things that you don't know unless someone tells you you don't know it, or unless you realize you don't know, right? It's not like most people could expect that at some point in their lives, usually as a child, someone would teach them how to tie their shoes. It's like, okay, you have your rabbit, and the rabbit goes through the hole, and you pull the bunny ears, or whatever it is, that how someone teaches you to tie your shoes, until it becomes an integrated part of your skill set. And then we can see some people, either through brain injury or through challenges, etc., they lose that skill set and they have to relearn the skill set. So it is an actual skill. It's not, when we're very comfortable with it, it gets filed in as a habit, but at some point, we didn't know how to do that. And the same is true of transformation. Unless you actually learn how it works and someone goes through to the trouble to teach you the process of transformation, that is just like tying your shoe. There is a process that you can go through, or learning how to tie a tie, right? You get to put the fox through the hole, or I don't know how to tie a tie, but someone can teach you that. Transformation is the same. Is a skill set that someone can impart to another person. But most of us don't know what that is. We just call what we do transformation because people, do some law of attraction and talk about mindset and make a vision board. That is not transformation. That is one tiny, tiny part of the alchemical cycle. And most transformational work does not actually integrate into all levels. We, in the neo spiritual community, we love mindset. There's a lot, and I'm not throwing shade at any coach or anyone who works with mindset. Mindset is great. Mindset is really important, but it is one small piece of the puzzle. And in order to actually be called transformation, all of that energy needs to integrate into all levels. We're talking in the body, in the heart, in the emotional body, in the mental body, and the mindset, and in the etheric bodies and the light bodies, in order to actually qualify as transformation. This is another reason why alchemy is so amazing, is because we get to work with it on all levels. So here I'm going to show you the cycle of transformation. Again, this is one of the core pieces of this spiritual technology. This is one core part, one very important part. And it's of course much more nuanced than we're really going to be able to get into today. So I'm going to give you an overall of these three phases. There are three phases of overall energy in this cycle. And there are 7 stages within those phases. So I'm going to give you an overview of the 7 stages, each of which holds particular gifts and initiations for the practitioner, and challenges where people can get stuck, either if they don't know how to move through that energy or aren't open to receiving the gifts of that stage, or somehow get mired down. And then we're going to look at one stage in particular that I think is really, really useful. Honestly, it's one of the pieces where most people get tripped up. So I'm going to give you my best tools and insights to as to perspective on that one stage of transformation. So we're going to start here, and I'll walk you through our phases and stages, and I'm going to go with you so you can draw this along. If you want to take notes and go along with me here, you can draw this in your notebook. We have our 3 phases here, and they are called the death phase. Death phase is first, and we have death as descending energy. Purification, kind of here on the bottom, purification phase, and then the rebirth phase. And we're keeping it very broad strokes in general here. These each have more specific names and technologies associated with them, but we're going, for our purposes today, death, purification, and rebirth phase. And we're going to add to that each of our 7 stages. So you see the death phase has 2 stages. The purification phase also has 2 stages, and the rebirth phase has 3 stages. And these are the individual energies that we're going to get into here. The first stage in the death phase has a specific name. I'm not using the specific names of the stages on purpose because I don't want to get stuck on the lingo of it. But the energy of the first stage is destruction. And specifically, this energy is about releasing form. So destruction, it's associated with, with burning things, with loss of physical structures. We experience destruction. People have this part of the alchemical cycle show up in their lives if they lose a job or lose a loved one, or anytime we're releasing form. So it can even be as simple as cleaning out your closet can be part of that destruction stage. Maybe you have a near-death experience, again, as a more dramatic example of that destruction stage. Maybe you're ready to, you don't lose your job, but you decide it's time to leave your job because you're ready for something different, right? So releasing form, releasing a material form is part of this destruction stage. The next stage we're calling dissolving, because it's about releasing energy. So this is also part of the death phase. In the first part of the death phase, we have destruction, where it's releasing form. And then the second part is dissolving, where we're releasing energy. Now, this is releasing the energetic and emotional attachments, the energetic and emotional structures, all of the subconscious pieces of identity attached to those forms that were released in the destruction stage. Let's use our example of losing a job, which unfortunately happens a lot, and unfortunately recently in pandemic years happened to a lot of people in a very challenging way. So the destruction part was losing the material form of having a job, having this particular way that you spent your time, the thing that you went to every day, the community of your colleagues, etc. Now, the dissolving aspect that accompanies that is maybe it brought some things into question for you about your personal identity. Oh, if I don't have this job, who am I? If I don't have these people in my life, who are the people that I spend time with? If that's not how I'm spending my time, then what are the new foundations that I need to consider for myself about my priorities? Maybe I was sacrificing so much time to this career that I really didn't spend the time that I wanted with my loved ones. What does that mean about me as a person? This is all the dissolving stuff. So releasing energy of that old identity that was attached to that job, releasing energetic and emotional attachment associated with that loss. We also have, again, to use a more mellow example of cleaning out your closet, right? So, say your destruction piece is around actually taking things out of your closet, and your dissolving is letting go of the emotional attachment that you had to some of those. Maybe you're getting rid of a dress that your best friend gave you, but it just doesn't fit right anymore. You've outgrown the style, and you're processing some emotion about letting go of this thing, but ultimately coming to terms with knowing that it's going to go off to a good home and make someone else very happy. Right. So the emotional process around releasing attachment to structures is what we're going through in the dissolving piece. The next stage is what we're calling analysis. So this is where we're entering into the purification stage, and we're using the energies of perspective and discernment. This is where we start to sort out the pieces that were released in the death phase. So, okay, you lost your job. All right, you're going through your emotional process. Now you start sorting things out. What did I like about my last job that I want to make sure I have in a new job? What did not work for me? What are my priorities moving forward? Okay, I want like this work-life balance, and I want to work for this kind of company that is rooted in ethics, ethics that match mine, etc. Or this is where you took all the clothes out of your closet and you cried over that one favorite dress that you just aren't really isn't really working for you anymore, and you start being strategic about what are you keeping, what are you getting rid of, and then how can you buy, use your money to invest in 3 really solid pieces that you super love, that are ethically made and sustainable fashion that you'll wear every day, versus 20 pieces of clothing that will wear out within 6 months. Right? So this is where we start to be a little more strategic. And again, I'm trying to use examples that hopefully you've had experience with here. So our analysis, perspective, and discernment, and then which leads us to reformation. This is part of that purification phase, but the reformation stage is where we start to build new structures. This is inviting in new form. This is inviting, okay, now that we've released this stuff and we've kind of figured things out about it, what do we want to create from here? This is where, okay, you lost your job, you went through your process around it, you figured out what you want, and now you revised your resume and you're taking interviews. Maybe you're starting a new job, or you're putting things out to your network, or you cleared out your closet, you strategized about what you're keeping, what you're not, and now you're putting everything back in the reorganizing fashion of all those home organizing shows that I forget what they're called right now, but the ones that people geek out on, with all of the closet organizing in a beautiful way. So this is, again, where we're putting things into practice, starting to create new form, which then moves us into the rebirth phase, the first stage of which is about reanimation. And it's bringing those new structures to life. It's saying, okay, here we have this new body that was created, a new physical form that now we get to reanimate, reconnect with life force energy, bring to life, truly bring to life. So this is where you reformatted your resume and you took all those interviews and you get a job, and now you start integrating into that community and discovering your identity of who you are at that new job. This is, you put everything back in your closet, and you have everything arranged, and it just makes you so happy when you walk into it, and it really feels like, okay, everything's organized, and I get so much joy from where I'm at in this. Our next stage in the rebirth phase is essence, which is where we're working with the core truth. We're distilling down to what is the that core essence of this new energy that has been reanimated, coming into the wholeness, starting to come into wholeness. And then finally, our actualization stage, which is completion and expression of that renewed and vital energy. So again, we've gone through this whole process here, through the destruction, dissolving, starting to figure things out, analyzing, putting things back together, reconnecting with life force energy, putting it into practice and coming to that core truth. And then ta-da, our actualization. This is the end, quote, end of the cycle of transformation. And I say the quote end because You guessed it, right after this, we go back into another cycle. Not necessarily immediately, but we do. So this is our cycle of transformation. And of course, there's so much more I could tell you about the cycle. This is our first look here. But I do want to tell you the one part that that most quote transformational guides focus on, and maybe you could guess it already based on how I was describing it. But the part that most people focus on is this part, is the analysis and reformation. The purification phase gets most of the attention in quote transformational work because people jump right into, okay, figure it out. What wasn't working? Let's talk about your feelings. Let's talk about your limiting beliefs. Let's audit your thought patterns, right? Like there's a lot of value in that. It's a really vitally important part of the transformation process, but it doesn't come first. And if people put that first without actually going through these death stages, then it honestly, it's going to come back and bite them in the ass because there's all this energy that hasn't been contended with. So what happens when people jump right into the analysis and reformation is like, let's focus on mindset and look at thought patterns and manifestation, is they loop in here and they never actually get to go on to the completion and actualization stages because they never took care of the old energy. They never actually intentionally went in and processed that energy. And so this is again where I see when people are trying for years and years to transform or to create a new identity or to come to new understanding about themselves, if it hasn't been working, it's because it was missing this stuff, which is super important. And again, most people don't even know it's a thing, right? Most people, this is, nobody's fault other than the culture that we're living in that doesn't actually teach us how transformation works. But you don't know until you know. And then once you do, you can put it into practice in your life. So we together are going to look at one stage in depth, and that stage is dissolution. I did talk about this a little bit here. This is the dissolving stage that we were looking at here. I told you a little bit about it when I was going through it, but now I want to get a little more specific because, like I said, this is what I see as one of the most potent and important and powerful stages in the alchemical cycle that most people don't know exists. And so this is where, again, we're working with the death of energetic and emotional structures, which include things like hidden and trapped emotion, clearing the subconscious energies. Think about the dissolution stage, and that actually is the name of the stage. So dissolution is the name of this one stage. You get to learn that one today. It is all of the stuff under the surface. Our subconscious mind is the majority of what we're working with in dissolution. And our subconscious mind includes our conditioned beliefs and pathways, includes instinct. It has a negative connotation. Like a lot of people view the subconscious as like, oh, that's where all your shadow is, all your unprocessed stuff. And it's positive and negative, right? So we have, again, the example I gave at the very beginning of how to tie your shoe, I bet most of the time when you're tying your shoe now, you don't have to consciously think about it. It's part of your subconscious because it has become a conditioned pathway. So our subconscious mind, the purpose of our subconscious mind is to store pattern recognition, to store predictable information so that we can free up our conscious awareness to focus on other things. Our subconscious mind, you can also think about as everything that we come into this life with. Also, it's all of our karma, it's our inherited beliefs, pathways, structures, it's our ancestral identity that we're storing in our blueprinting. It's what people inherit through epigenetics, so inherited trauma through through genocide and slavery and all of these really horrible things that people have experienced over the years, that groups of people have experienced over the years, or also that individuals have experienced. If someone had a traumatic life and then they have a child, and then that child has measurable effects in the body and in their psyche of the inherited trauma from the parent. So all of that lives in the subconscious. So doesn't it sound important to pay attention to releasing energy from the subconscious? If all of that is in there, it's probably a pretty good idea. So just to give you an idea of how powerful the subconscious is, the conscious mind processes 40 bits of data per second. Per second, that's a lot. right? 40 bits of data per second. And I mean, that sounds like your conscious mind is doing a lot as it's paying attention in the world. But your subconscious mind, get ready for it, your subconscious processes 40 billion bits of data per second, which is astronomical. So again, you think your conscious mind is doing a lot with 40 bits of data per second, but your subconscious, again, that includes all of these things: conditioned beliefs and pathways, instinct, positive and negative views about the world, hidden trapped emotion, our karma, our things that we learned that we didn't even know we were filing away. 40 billion bits of data per second. So it is 1 billion times more powerful. So it is 1 billion times more important that we make sure that our subconscious, our emotional and energy bodies, emotional and energetic structures are operating in a way that is clear and clean and aligned and not holding a lot of crap stored in here. We don't want that. It's not good for us, and it goes in our underlying blueprint, in our underlying operating systems, and affects our behavior and affects our way of being in the world. And most of the time, we don't even know it because it's operating subconsciously. So, one quick note about attachment here. I think I mentioned attachment, our emotional attachments and energetic structures. Attachment isn't bad. Attachment has, I think, kind of a bad rap, especially in the neo spiritual community. And people can talk about, like, oh, you need to free yourself of all attachment. And dissolution, one of the things I love about alchemy is that dissolution makes a distinction between crystallized and dynamic attachment. So, crystallized attachment or fixed attachment is stagnant. It's some rigidly held thought pattern or belief or energy that is no longer alive. It is no longer responding to inputs of information. It is, again, it's rigid, it's dead. So, that kind of attachment, yeah, we can release that kind of attachment. But dynamic attachment or volatile attachment or flexible attachment is healthy. And this is where we have living belief structures, active investigation of identity structures. That kind of attachment is okay, and it's healthy to have. It's good to have, because that's part of what makes us who we are and part of how we are engaging with our continuing aliveness in the world. So as we're dissolving, nothing that is true is lost. Nothing that's part of the core of who you are, that is pure, that is vibrant, that is alive, all of that you get to keep. When you're going through dissolution, you're getting rid of the crap, you're getting rid of the dead stuff, you're getting rid of toxic emotions, you're getting rid of trauma. So just keep in mind, you still get to keep who you are as we're clearing out the subconscious layer with dissolution. Dissolution in the world. Again, I gave some examples about the parts of ourselves that get cleared out, that get to benefit from working with dissolution. But we see this in the world, especially as processing collective grief is a really, really big one. Right now, there's a lot of trauma in the world at large. We live, especially here in the Western world and in the United States, like there's a lot of residual trauma. There's a lot of immediate trauma that's happening with a lot of the systems of oppression that we're living in the world right now. People being hungry, people being sick, people, natural disasters and genocide and wars are happening. And pandemic, right? There's a lot happening that translates as fear and grief in the body and in the experience. So with dissolution, when we're working with clearing that subconscious, we're working with clearing energetic and emotional energy. We are healing and transmuting trauma, both our lived trauma in our personal experience and inherited trauma. So this is another reason why this is so important, both individually for our personal process of healing and releasing these hidden trapped emotions and stuck energies, and then also translating that into the world around us, because there's so much grief and trauma in the world. Clearing ancestral karma. This is very important again for releasing the inherited trauma and releasing karmic signatures that might incarnate in unhelpful and unhealthy ways moving forward. Creating safety and compassion in uncertainty. A lot of people are really not good at being uncomfortable, and again, like, resilience is a skill. So we have this time period in the world right now where, again, most people are really uncomfortable, right? And a lot of people, if they're not uncomfortable, either they're super privileged and they're ignoring it, or they don't even actually realize how uncomfortable they are. But with that, when we know about dissolution, we know about alchemy, it enables us to create safety in the dissolving, because it's empowering. It's empowering to be able to process grief. It puts us in touch with our humanity and with our empathy, to be able to be present with dissolving unhealthy emotional structures, and to dissolve and release energies of pain and trauma. And that can also create a lot of compassion if we understand, or if we even have an idea, even if we can't ever understand it, if we know that these energies live in the world and live in the hearts and the minds of people around us, and in the bodies of people around us every day, that we're seeing every day, whether we know it or not, we can have so much more compassion if we know that this is what we're doing, is we are unwinding our collective distortion fields and egregores. And these are cumulative thought form energies that have taken on a life of their own. And that's really what we're doing with dissolution, is we are releasing these toxic energy and thought and emotional patterns, whether it's in us individually or in the world at large. So I'm going to show you 2 practices for dissolution. Again, this is part of what you can take away and put into practice immediately in your life. I'm going to show you 2 physical practices, one of which is coming from medical qigong, where we're going to work with clearing the lung channels, and then the other is an alchemical meditation. You can do these to a much greater degree than we're going to do them here, because we're only going to take a few minutes for it here. We're going to work with clearing the lung channels, because the lung is the seat of grief in the body, and lung channel goes from this point right at the front of your shoulder. So I want you to take your fingers of one hand, and you're going to kind of dig into the front of one shoulder. And this, if there's some emotion that starts to come up for you when we do this, then that's okay, and just breathe. Again, lungs are the seat of grief in the body. So by clearing grief out of the body, we're supporting dissolution. We're supporting releasing that hidden trapped emotion from the body. So I want you to find a spot, and it's going to be like right in front of the head of the humerus, that is tender. And when you hit the tender spot, you found it, and you can kind of dig in there and poke in there a little more. And you can use your breath, use your fingers to kind of massage in there in that tender point at the front of the shoulder. And if you like, you can visualize this bright white light, like brighter than bright white, like metallic titanium white. And the sound of the lung channel, the sound of the lungs is sh or sha. So you can tone if you like. If you want to offer some breath to this, you can go sha. And then the lung channel goes all the way down the thumb side of the arms, all the way down to the thumb. So we're going to take this energy from the shoulder that we've been squishing around here in the front of the shoulder. You're going to pull it down the thumb side of the arms, out the thumb, and either throw it away into, if you have a candle going, or you can snap to clear that energy. We don't want to leave it hanging around. You're going to go down the thumb side of the arm, all the way down through the wrist, out the thumb, and clear that energy. Sha. 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 Good. We're going to do the other side. Again, so I hope you can see, you can do this much longer, right? Like we're doing a quick version of this practice here. This is also really good if you either currently have or have had COVID, to clear out energy from the lung channels, to clear stagnant energy in the lung channels. So again, finding that tender point in front of the shoulder, and notice, do the 2 sides feel different? I usually have one that feels a little more tender than the other. Sometimes it switches. Use your breath. Bringing that white light to this point to clear grief. It might even not be anything that you know you have. You might think, oh, I feel fine, but we're inviting clearing of emotion below the surface. Any subconscious emotion or energetic structures, we're inviting that to release. Good. And again, we're going to pull this down the thumb side of the arm. We're dredging the channels, pulling this down, and snap to release. Sha. Sha. All the way down out the thumb. Sha. Good. And we're going to just take a moment to lightly bathe those channels in that brilliant white light. Like you're not pulling things out anymore. You're just offering this beautiful white light all the way down the thumb sides of the arms, bathing in that light to offer healing. And the lungs are the seat of grief is the shadow emotion, but courage, honor, and integrity is the light of the lungs, light of the lung channels, courage, honor, and integrity. So offering that to the channels. Nice. And our last practice that we're going to do really quickly here, we're going to do a very quick version of this, but I'm going to just give you the tools you need so you can put it into practice on your own. This is called a Bain-Marie meditation. And this alchemical meditation works with internal washing and dissolving. So it works by, and if you like, you can close your eyes. No one can see you. People can only see my slides and me. So if you'd like to close your eyes, you can, or otherwise have soft gaze, 1,000-yard gaze. And we're going to settle into the breath, dropping into that nice deep breath in the belly. And exhaling with a sigh. Good. Deep breath in and out. And as we continue to flow with the breath, feeling it flow in and out like waves. I'd like you to imagine that you're seated along the edge of the ocean. And you're somewhere nice and warm, so you don't have to worry about the water being cold. It's very warm and the waves are gentle and pleasant. And you're sitting or lying down if you like. The waves aren't going to take you away. You're okay. But you're in a position that you can feel the waves washing around you as they lap in and out along the shore. And as you inhale, you feel that wave, that water washing through you. And as you exhale, it washes back out to sea. You inhale, breathing that wave in as it washes through you. And as it does, you notice it starts to dissolve away any crystallized emotion or crystallized thought patterns that are ready to go. And as it washes out, it carries them away to be recycled in the ocean. And use your breath. If there's any emotion that's coming up in this practice, that's normal and that's okay. And the ancient alchemists actually used to see the salt in tears as that crystallized emotion that had been dissolved. So we can think of the salt in our tears, just like the salt in the ocean, as all of the crystallized thought forms that are returning to source, all of the energy that we're releasing so that it can be free. And instead of having hard, crystallized, stagnant emotions or thought forms or ideas or beliefs, we get to dissolve them and release them so that we can free up our aliveness, free up our life force for healthy attachment, for healthy, dynamic learning and transformation. Breathing in, as you breathe in, that wave washes in, that beautiful, warm, nourishing wave washes through you. And as it washes out, it carries away everything that you don't need anymore. Take one more breath here. And let it go. Knowing that you can return here anytime, and this practice is always available to you. But for now, go ahead and place your hands somewhere on your body, maybe on your heart, and just offer yourself a moment of gratitude for taking this practice, the space and time for this practice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Gently bringing yourself back to present time awareness, feeling the weight of your muscles and bones, feeling your feet on the ground, wiggling your fingers and toes, fluttering the eyelids, and when you're ready, opening your eyes. Beautiful. I know once we do that practice, we kind of get, just want to stay there. But I promise you can revisit this. You have these tools forever. You have access to this to incorporate into your practice now. So with all of this, you had a little snapshot into one of the core teachings of alchemy. We talked about alchemy as a mystery school. I hope you got something out of this that you maybe didn't even know you needed, but I hope that you have something that you can take away and apply to your practice already right away. Because again, my goal in teaching and sharing these practices is that you can apply it to your life, which is why I created Becoming an Alchemist. Becoming an Alchemist is a course designed to help you awaken, embody, and integrate alchemy into your life. In this course, you will awaken your alchemical remembrance. You'll collaborate with powerful cosmic cycles. You will master the cycle of transformation, which is the cycle that we were just talking about. We're going to go even more in depth, give you tools and practices for each of the stages so that you can feel really confident applying this into your life and your work. We're going to transmute alchemy through the body, and you will practice alchemical ceremonies and rituals. You will also take away tools and practices so that you can integrate alchemy into your life and into your work and your practice. So that is Becoming an Alchemist, which is the course that includes 5 alchemy training modules, including mystical teachings, energetic, and ritual practices. So we're working with, very precise spiritual technology here in your alchemy trainings. It also includes 5 alchemy rituals, including transmissions, journey, and a visioning ceremony. So you'll get to do alchemical ritual and practice as part of this. You'll have access to a private online classroom with a cohort of like-hearted seekers and lifetime access to the materials. So once you're in, you have it forever, and you get to continue to revisit and integrate these and over the course of your evolving practice. Becoming an Alchemist begins October 13th, 2022. And if you happen to see this video, I'm going to put this video up on the internet. If you happen to see this another time and we pass that date, that's okay. Go ahead to my website anyway, and it may be open for re-registration, or I also have other alchemy trainings. So don't worry about it if you see it past the date. But for right now, we're starting October 13th of 2022. It goes through November 17th. So you'll have a little more than a month with me. And since you're here today, I would like to offer you a discount. This course is $497 when paid in full, or 2 payments of $277. But this code, since you're here, is a code for $50, $50 discount. Both of those are for $50, but since one option is a pay in full option or one option is a 2 payment option, I had to make 2 different codes. So go ahead and write them both down if you're not sure which option you would like to choose, but both of them give you $50 off, even though one of them says Alchemy 22. So just make note of that. And the page on my website where you can find this, my website is michellehawk.com, my name.com. And it's either under the Becoming an Alchemist tab or Becoming-N-Alchemist. And I would love to see you in that course. If that resonates with you, you can go ahead and sign up directly, or you can send me an email if you have any questions. And for now, we can go ahead and see if there are any questions in the chat or any questions from anyone watching. Or thoughts or shares or comments.
I just love everything that you were talking about. Everything resonated so much. And, I feel like the language really called me in, and It's so refreshing to hear this presentation with this like language that resonates so well.
Thank
And I learned so much as well. And yeah, thank you.
Awesome.
It was wonderful.
Thank you. What's one thing that you're gonna run out and apply and put to use right
Oh
away?
my gosh, I love that Bain Marie meditation was really delicious. Also the lung clearing, all of it, really.
Yay. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for being here. I'm glad you were here. Awesome.
Yeah.
And any questions or anything else, or you're just gonna marinate on it and let it sit?
One word that you spoke of earlier in the class that I hadn't heard before, but I was just like, oh yes, was the egregores.
Mhm.
And were you defining that as like cumulative thought forms that can kind of
Yeah.
stagnate?
Yeah.
Do you find this happening like location based?
So it could, yeah, an egregore. Thanks for asking. That's great. An egregore is a collective thought form that kind of takes on a life of its own, right? And so it's when we're working in translating these spiritual concepts to the broader level, right? We look at what are our collectively agreed upon ideas and structures that seem to have taken on a life of their own that no one even really thinks about, right? So we have egregores that I the way that I look at them, they tend to mostly not be healthy, right? So we have
Mm-hmm.
egregores around the ideas of yeah, and it's the kind of thing that a lot of people just take for granted as like this is the way things are, right? So for a long time, you know, here in the US, we have a lot of really unhealthy egregores. That we have worked through over the course of our history, but we also, of course, have just as many that are still present. So looking at like systems of racial oppression, right? Like those are really predominant egregores that we are still working through, right? But they're these collective thought forms that have a lot of emotion behind them, that have a lot of energy behind them, that people for a very long period of time have kind of taken for granted as the way things are until they are dismantled and challenged and taken apart, right? So we also have egregores around like what I'll call like toxic work culture, right? So the idea of, oh, it is normal to work 40 hours a week and to bend over backwards to accommodate your demanding boss and to be available all the time, right? Like that is, again, a thing that people don't even bat an eye at. But it's like, well, where did this come from? It's a collective thought form around the there's a lot wrapped up in that of like what makes you a quote good employee, what makes you worthy, makes you worthy of income, what makes you a desirable contribution to the workforce, what is the white picket fence vision, like the success, building on the success and pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps, right? Like you notice also when we start to look into what makes an egregore, there's a lot of these words and sayings that are just part of our common consciousness, right? So, another, there's so many, right? But again, they're these collective, like stagnant thought forms that are so big, we kind of take them for granted, and most of them are not great. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Thank you. That was like such a good explanation too. I feel like I have a good understanding and having that example too. I see that a lot in specific industries, work cultures is
Yep,
a perfect example of that.
great.
I'm curious, I want to, as a Reiki practitioner, I wanted to also like mention how refreshing and wonderful it is to hear you speak about these topics with like the energetic understanding and background, because that was really what sunk in for me was that one of the big reasons people aren't getting full transformation is because they have this like unprocessed energy. And so putting that energetic perspective on these alchemical stages provided a lot of clarity, and kind of had like an aha moment.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, like with these egregores, energetically, how do you approach that? Do you approach that like on an individual scale or more on like a collective?
Hmm. That's a great question. The um I'm going to give an example of what happens if we don't address the energetic aspect, and then I'll get to the how do we address it question, right? So I have a friend who had a near death experience in at the end of last year, so end of 2021. And he's a little bit of an adrenaline junkie kind of guy, and extreme sports and rock climbing, and or I mean that's not his main thing, but like mountain biking. And he was being a dumbass. He admits that he was being a dumbass and rock climbing in a very unsafe way in Death Valley. And he fell far, and he broke three of his limbs, and he got a concussion, and he was like a mile and a half into Death Valley. He had to crawl out on three broken limbs so he didn't die in Death Valley. And he, again, close friend of mine, and he was texting me later like, hey, this is, this happened. He was on a trip, um and we had a lot of conversations after, after he had surgery, had multiple surgeries, after he, was out of the like life being threatened. We had a lot of conversations about the energetics and the emotion of that rite of passage that he went through. And again, this is a pretty dramatic example. A lot of people aren't going to have situations like that in their lives, hopefully, necessarily, right? But we do all have these death moments, and we have these really defining moments whether or not we recognize them. And so for him, it was a really important piece to dissolve the energetics around that, around the fear of physically losing his life, around the shame of being in that experience and messing up and then having some really horrible things happen as a result, around letting a part of his identity die. And he, and that's something I told him. It was like, a part of you did die out there, even though you actually, your body, you stayed in your body, you're okay, relatively. A part of you didn't make it off that rock. And he was kind of dumbstruck by that, of like, oh my gosh, you're right. And so then going through the loss of identity of some of this carefree, innocent, getting to go through life that way. And so that for him was, was really important in the psychological and the emotional aspects of moving through this healing process, in addition to all the physical therapy and everything else he was doing with his body. And so we look at what happens if that isn't addressed, right? And granted, he did address it, and he had me in his corner for that. But what happens if that doesn't happen, right? And there are so many people, I think, especially in a little bit older generation, like my parents' generation, where they didn't talk about their feelings, or it wasn't safe to express emotion, or it wasn't, they had to like be a man and take care of their family, or be nice or be quiet or whatever. So all of that emotion and all of those feelings and all of the identity and the questions about, well, who am I now, and what is my worthiness now, and if I lost my job, then who am I as a person, who am I as a man, right? Like all of these are very common questions that get stuffed down, get stuffed underneath, and then manifest in the body as physical illness, manifest as depression, anxiety, chronic illness, heart conditions. Again, grief in the body is the lungs, right? So asthma or allergies or COPD, right? All of these things related to physical manifestations of stuck emotion, or in the heart, right? As heart disease, or the blood, or the stomach, the inability to process energy manifests as all sorts of digestive issues. And it's like, oh well, I have a bad gut. Well, you don't have a bad gut, you just can't process energy through the body. So we see it, in, again, in physical manifestation, but then also in, hair trigger temper, in mental illness, in patterns of addiction, in not being able to regulate their emotional field or take responsibility for their behavior in a healthy way, or not being able to communicate effectively. So we see, and again, this is why when we're looking out in the world, to kind of come back around, this is a very long answer, but to come back around to your question about like the individual and the collective, right? It is both. And addressing these as both, right? Of like the individual experience of trauma might be different, but the universal experience of trauma, there are commonalities in the universal experience of trauma, and the effects of not actually addressing the energetic dissolving of that. So for people who are resourced and do have privilege and have access to meditation classes, to personal mentorship, to trainings that they can take. Yes, absolutely doing it individually, but also we blueprint off of each other's nervous systems. So knowing that, okay, part of our responsibility is healing ourselves and is coming into that clearness for ourselves, so that when we go out in the world, we can offer that, even on, if no words are said about it, we can offer it on the energetic level to maybe bring peace to someone's nervous system. Or maybe if we're, if we're working on it for ourselves, we can have a conversation with someone where maybe we would have gotten triggered in the past, and this time we don't get triggered. So we don't perpetuate harm in someone else's nervous system. Right. So there are those ways of working on it individually and then having that impact move beyond us, as I firmly believe all of our healing practice and transformation practice ideally should, right, move beyond us for the benefit of all beings around us. And then we can also, as practitioners, as people who are serving in the world, then make resources available for other people to do that individually, and then also work on the collective field, right? So there are a lot of people who lead world meditations for, World Peace Day, or celebrating the seasons and the high holy days, right? So all of that is about entraining a frequency for the planet that, and I'm a firm believer in, like, we can't just love and light our way out of this shit. Like, we have to actually have equity in our practices. For those of us who are practitioners, have equity and have resource availability, make things free for people, make sure, that's why I do free classes like this, right? Make things available to people who really, really need it, have sliding scale offerings, and take the time to live your spiritual practice in your everyday life. Because you might have a conversation with someone, the guy at the gas station, who he's never going to come take a class from me, or I have no idea if he would or not, right? But he might come take a class from me. But just in case he doesn't, how can I let my presence be kind, and how can I invite peace in even just that one interaction with one person? It might make a difference, it might not, but either way, I'm putting energy into dissolving the systems of harm and the structures of harm every day. And in my perspective, that's the point of spiritual practice, is that we use it all the time, every day. Thanks for asking. That was a very, like, long long circuitous thought.
Thank you. I love everything that comes out of your mouth. So thanks for taking the time to keep it going.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for asking. That was great, Ren.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this class today. I wanted to share with you, you're such a generous teacher, sharing all this deep wisdom here in this like free class. And, I'm curious. I'm excited to learn more from you. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, I'd love to be in contact. And for any of you out there watching the recording, you do have my website. My michellehawk.com is my website, and then the Becoming an Alchemist course you can access through there. I will send out the link to this recording so you can review it, and it'll have the discount codes. If you're watching this down the line, go ahead and check out the course anyway, and see, even if it's after it's already happened and you're just watching this on YouTube later, reach out to me anyway, and I'll let you know what else is going on, or how else you can bring alchemy into your life. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching, and sending you lots of alchemical blessings.